Thank you. Okay. It's very nice to be here, and thanks for inviting me and giving me the opportunity to tell you a little bit about what we've been doing here up in the high Arctic in the north at UNIS, where we have been holding a field TA academy, so a course for teaching assistants and especially tailored to the field, which we do a lot of field work here at UNIS. And just see if I can get this in front. Yeah, so just to kind of give you a little bit of a background for those who maybe are not so familiar with how UNIS fits into the iEarth family. We are the hub for Focus Area 4, so enhancing field teaching and learning. And there's three main core people who are concerned with that and driving that forward. And that is myself. I'm the iEarth Education Chair in the Department of Arctic Geology at UNIS. We also have Maria Jensen, who is the head of department in Arctic Geology, and she's an associate professor in sedimentology. And we then have Rafael Horota, who is the iEarth PhD, and he is working on digital field technologies. So those are our core members, and then of course we have a whole ecosystem of other people, such as the iEarth students, and so on. And so there's quite a lot going on here, even though we are quite a small institution, of course. Small but mighty. And then we have the Focus Area 4 objectives. So in order to kind of speak to those, enhancing field learning and teaching, we have as objectives to document the present status and monitor the culture change in field teaching and learning. We also aim to develop, test, and evaluate field teaching methods and outcomes. We aim to test and document methods to improve field learning and improve the transfer between the classroom and the field. Even though much of what we do is field work, we still want to kind of connect, to come together, that connection between classroom and field. We also aim to develop a framework for field skills certification, and that's certainly something that we've been quite involved in here, not just in the Arctic Geology department. And lastly, we aim to establish local field teaching laboratories. So those are our five main objectives, Focus Area 4 objectives. And then the Fields TA Academy that I will be talking about today really speaks to most of these objectives, and in specifically to kind of improve the culture of how we teach and how we learn, and how we transfer knowledge from the classroom to the field. But it also speaks to things like developing a framework for actual certification of the skills that the students gain by being here. And the Field TA Academy is a course that has now been running for 3 years. And this past spring, so I guess February, March, I was organizing this course together with Tina Dahl and Simone Lang. Tina was involved quite heavily in Bioseed and is now working in the study administration here at UNIS, and Simone has also been quite involved in Bioseed, but is an associate professor in Arctic biology. So together we formed a team and we organized this year's Field TA Academy. And the reasoning behind why we wanted to hold this course is because of a general lack of training for graduate teaching assistants. So, often I think this is changing now, but it's still prevalent that we let graduate students teach and interact with perhaps undergraduate students, and they are not really that prepared for teaching, and they don't have a kind of formal qualification to teach. And certainly when not just in geology, but talking to people from biology, for example, when we thought about, you know, how we were prepared for teaching as graduate students, it was pretty dismal. You were basically told, here's the material, you go out and teach the students, and you kind of learned on the job. And so that kind of lack of formal preparation, I think, is one, quite detrimental to the ability of students to teach effectively, but also then to learn effectively for those who are taught. And that is, I think, especially important to be prepared in a setting where you have a lot of field work and where you have programs where you really put a lot of emphasis of being out in the field, which of course comes with a whole bunch of other complications, you know, not just teaching students, but making sure they're warm, making sure that there's no polar bears coming along, so, you know, safety, and so on. So that was the motivation for us to put this course on. And so this was a course that was held, and it is also typically held every year over about 5 days. And we spread it out over 3 weeks. So we had several weeks in which we had a day or two dedicated to that specific course. And it was basically an introduction to teaching and learning in higher education, and also to field scenarios, and to improve teaching and student learning. We primarily aimed it at PhD students, but also opened it up for master students. And in fact, we ended up with having also a postdoc who was taking part in this. And the workload was about 35 hours. Especially for the PhD students, they could apply at the home university to approve this participation in this course as an academic training component. And we had quite a lot of people teaching on it, actually. So the team that contributed to this course was quite large, actually. So for these altogether, for these 5 days, we had 10 people teaching. So it is quite heavy on the staff side. And just to give you an overview of what the kind of spread was of the topics that we covered and the themes that we worked on with the students. They started with a pedagogy introduction of teaching and learning, and that was conducted by Robert Koorts and Marie van der Klot, who are both at Bergen, but also adjuncts at UNIS. And then we moved on to day 2 with diversity and inclusion, and that was done by Arunima Sen, Maria Jensen, and Eera Rinne from UNIS. And then we moved on to day 3, which was talking about feedback, group work, and conflict resolution. That was Simone, Tina, and I. And then finally, we ended with 2 days that were dedicated to field teaching and learning, and those were led by Mark Furs and Marius Jonasson. So you see already that there were quite a lot of people involved, and also there was quite a lot of spread between the departments here at UNIS. It is quite a involvement actually from all the departments, except maybe Arctic Technology. And then in terms of the students, this was the spread of students. So we started out with 15, and those were the people who signed up. That doesn't mean that they actually attended it. So I'll speak a little bit more about that. We had a kind of a dropout rate of students who at the last minute really couldn't do the course for a variety of reasons. But out of the 15, we had a lot of like a mix of students from different department, and a lot of them actually hadn't done any kind of pedagogical courses or training before. So we did ask them that as they were signing up, just to suss out, what they kind of, at what level they were at. And then we had many master students, actually, even though the course was aimed at PhD students, we had mostly master students signing up. And then, as I said, one of the participants was a postdoc. And so now I'll give you a few highlights. So, I don't want to go through the nitty-gritty of every single day and what we did. And I can certainly speak to that if you're interested. But I thought I'd give you a little overview of some of the kind of highlights and some of the points that we did. And one of the themes that we had was actually group work, because a lot of what we do here at UNIS in our courses has a group work component. And I don't know how it is at your institution, but group work here, and certainly when I think back of being an undergraduate, is very divisive. So people either really love it or they absolutely hate it. So, it's quite a kind of a Marmite aspect of teaching, right? You either really like it or you don't. And often, it depends on the group, of course. Some people think it's the best thing about a course that you have group work. And then some have a quite frustration with a group if you have people, for example, who don't pull their weight and sit back, or, don't really want to contribute. And so that aspect we thought was certainly worth talking about, but also, treating as to how to optimize this aspect of teaching and learning. And this was presented or led both by Tina as well as Simone. And Tina in particular had this exercise that we did with the students where we had scenarios and so case studies where the students were put into groups, and then they were supposed to organize a project based on fieldwork. And also dealing with a kind of specific group of people. And then once they became familiar with this premise of having to organize this group and this research and the fieldwork and so on, we actually gave each of the participants a role. And I'm not sure whether you can see that very well, but there were quite a few roles that are some of the kind of typical things you get in group work. So for example, people really want to lead and kind of drive that they get a good grade. And then you also have typically or anecdotally people in a group who actually would rather be doing something else, and they kind of, what they want to do is go skiing or, plan their next adventure. And so we gave each of the students a role, and they kind of acted it out accordingly. And here on the left-hand side, you can see a picture where you've got a group work or a group that we had. And in that case, on the very left-hand side, you see Simone playing, I think, role 2, which is, this is really boring. I'll start to look at my phone. Okay, and this doesn't really interest me, and so on. And so it was quite interesting to see that kind of group dynamic and who played what role. And of course, then collectively we discuss this kind of dynamic and what to do when you are dealing with teaching students in groups, and then the groups take on that said dynamic. And one of the things that has been done quite successfully here, especially with Simone Lang's courses in Arctic biology, is to draw up group contracts. So Simone then talked about, having a kind of an outline of if you have a group in or group work in your courses, and potentially that work goes on for quite a long time, say over the course of the semester, you know, how can we then make sure that everybody contributes? So she has been using the group contracts quite successfully, where every group comes up with a kind of ground rules and it agrees on who does what, how much, and everybody commits to it. And we were actually quite curious as to, you know, how does this really work, and what's the kind of, you know, do you have to then remind people of what they've signed and so on? And because they have to submit this also to the course responsible. And apparently it works really, really well. So there's only, I think anecdotally, one instance or one or two instances where Simone had to pull up the group contract and remind people, but actually just, it seems like putting it down on paper and committing to it does the trick for the most part. So that was one aspect that was quite interesting. And then I want to tell you a little bit about the field days, where Mark and Marius were in charge of the field days, and they, together with the students, really came up with this field TA competence checklist. So a kind of considerations, what to keep in mind when you're going out into the field as a field TA. That includes pre-field and in-field, so planning and delivery, as well as then a kind of specific things, so, you know, aspects like safety, group management and leadership, teaching and delivery, but also a kind of post-field work, so debrief. And that's kind of like the optimum thing to do, but it was quite interesting to see the students' perspectives on field work. And within those 2 field days that we had, they were also, on the one hand, looking at field scenarios. So, you know, what you do if something like that happens, for example. But they were also then asked to go get into groups and teach each other, actually via a pair up, to measure slope angle. We chose this because the measuring a slope angle was kind of was something that we all do across the disciplines. So we didn't want something specifically to just one of the disciplines that were represented in the course. So what the students were asked to do is to watch a video, and then to teach each other how to measure the slope angle, and also certify each other. So with a checklist of, you know, what you need to think about when you do that particular measurement. And the premise was to basically go out into the field and install an instrument, of course a fictional instrument, but an instrument nonetheless, that is placed on a slope, and do it safely. So the students were then in charge of the health and safety brief organizing. So I'll just add to that for the field days, one day, the first day, was actually spent in class discussing all these scenarios and teaching each other how to measure the slope angle and so on, and also organizing the HSE brief. And then the second day was actually going out into the field and doing this practically. And then we threw them a bit of or Mark and Marius threw them a bit of a curveball, because in the morning they were all geared up to go to Bolterdalen, and then Mark and Marius said, well, actually there's been a mess up with the vehicles. We don't have any vehicles, so we must find a new field site. So they were then asked to actually do this and reorganize, which they did brilliantly, actually. So they changed the site, and they decided to go up to the ski slope here in town, which was quite straightforward. And so once in the field, they were taking turns on of being the TA for other TAs, and we also had some volunteers. We had some undergraduate and master's students that came along and basically made up the groups. So we had several groups, and then the students who were in the course were taking turns of being the TA and teaching the group how to measure slope angle. And then, just like we had in the group work before in class with Tina and Simone's part, Mark and Marius actually gave this certain students different kind of scenarios. For instance, a student that is too cold, or you are now asked to play a student who is completely disinterested and wants to walk away from the field side, and so on. So they were kind of scenarios that you may encounter in the field, and how to deal with that. And as that played out, they kind of stopped and discussed it and reflected on that. And from the kind of feedback, it seemed like the students, as they were assuming the role of the TA, got better and better at kind of dealing with those disturbances or distractions. And so they had the reflection in the field, as well as then a debrief, a kind of in-class debrief, discussing these various scenarios, and you know, how to deal with difficulties in the field, and in making sure that everybody's safe, but then also making sure that everybody's actually learning, and not just standing around or getting cold or uncomfortable. And part of that, so certainly in terms of that slope angle, that ties really into this drive to have a certification ultimately for the things we do here in the courses. So specifics like slope angle I mentioned in the course, but things like snow measurements, for example. We have this kind of certification already with microscope work. So when the students are using microscopes in their courses, they first have to go through certification of, you know, making sure that they know how to use that instrument. So this is kind of a drive to, you know, give them, give them training, but also give them a kind of certificate or certification that they have these skills, they know how to do a certain skill. And then what we also did, and that was kind of an add-on that I introduced, inspired by Kirsty, Shersti, and Carly, was to also do an activity bingo with the students. So we introduced that on one of the first days, I think, and let them collect the bingos. And I designed it quite broadly, also because we had so many different backgrounds from, you know, the participants. But that was actually quite fun because they got to know each other a little bit better. I mean, not to say that nobody knew each other, because it's quite a small institution, UNIS, right? But they did get to know each other a little bit better, and they also interacted more. Plus, they got chocolate from Europe, which, you know, was the kind of motivator as well. But it was, I think they quite liked it. And so I think this is something that I would like to keep doing in my courses, that it's quite a nice way to break the ice and make the students interact a little bit. Okay, whoops. I think I just crashed my PowerPoint. Just let me get that up again. Sorry. Sorry about that. Let's see if I can get that up again. Can you see it now? Yes, good. Sorry about that.
You see the whole thing now, Anna.
If you flip the view.
Yeah. Come on.
Let's see here.
We got the presenter screen.
Okay, what about now?
No,
No.
we have nothing.
We see you.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
Let's just try it one more time. Now?
Yeah, but if you there's this one
Swap displays, yeah, try that one.
Button on the top there.
Swap to yeah.
Yeah.
Now?
Yes, perfect.
Yes. Thank you. I'm not very good at PowerPoint. Anyway, so some thoughts about having been part of this this course, which I think is very valuable. But it was quite frustrating to have a lot of students dropping out. So I showed you this, 15 students signing up. And then as the days got closer and closer, I tended to get these emails saying, oh, actually, I can't do it. So the dropout rate was quite a lot. And by the end, I think we finished up with 10 people. So that was really quite low, I think. And we need to think about ways to really make this a bit more compulsory. And I don't know how much we can push for that because, we are not a degree granting institution here at UNIS. But it, I think, should be pushed, at least with the PhD students, by their supervisors, that they really should attend this course. And so it ended up being almost like a 1-to-1 ratio for students to staff. And that is very work intensive if you kind of add up the hours, right? And several people teaching on that. Despite that, I think it's a really valuable resource for students. And I know that, when I was a graduate student teaching assistant, I would have really valued this kind of training and that kind of, even discussing some of the issues that come up as you teach and as you embark on that journey to, become a teacher in higher education. And so in terms of the feedback, this is what some of the feedback that we got from the actual students. What did you find most relevant for improving your teaching and student learning? And keep in mind that they were able to put several things. So this is why they, the number adds up to more than 10, but they certainly seems to be liked the feedback, group projects and group conflicts quite a lot, but found none of the themes seem completely irrelevant, thankfully. And the best thing about this course, and I think that is also what I would say as having taught on it, is that exchange amongst people. That sharing of perspective and really getting, a kind of a discussion going. It is difficult sometimes to teach as well as to learn. And especially when you're starting out in it, I think it can feel quite daunting. But having a kind of exchange between the participants, but also the people who taught the course is really quite valuable. And they also like the fieldwork and what they call the acting, so the scenarios, I guess, which was in a quite an informal setting, so you didn't get too stressed about it, but it still covered some of those things that they may encounter in the field. And then we also asked them, what are there any other things you would like to have included in this course? And many of them said how to lecture. But I'm not sure whether that's kind of a scope of that particular course. But it's certainly something to think about as we move forward, and maybe hold it again. It seems to be quite the challenge for students, especially when they're asked to teach early in their career, to be, on the one hand, confident, but we're also, effective at teaching and making sure that the students that they teach learn effectively and actively. And with that, I think that is me. And I hope I'll give you a little bit of a glimpse into the Field TA Academy. And I would be happy to discuss and answer questions if you have any. Thanks.